Computer.
Good.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Winter, fractalfield.com, fractalu.com. I'm with Chris Hughes, who just came back for our wonderful conference in South France. And I'm with Chip Story, who's very much involved in the zero point energy movement and zero point group, who has convened and suggested we chat. Go ahead, Chip. You were saying.
Yes, we have realized over the years that some of these amazing inventors were using consciousness and very specifically in some cases, like Stan Myers. I think he's admitted his water motor was uh, highly controlled. Cal Richardson, who worked out of Salt Lake City and built an EVO bubble car around a pink Volkswagen, and essentially, this plasmoid he took to the moon and retrieved the Apollo 14 plaque and some other crazy stories. Um, and his story was that he controlled its not only its navigation, but its actual propulsion and everything else with his consciousness. And so, leveraging the work of Bill Tiller at Stanford with his water experiments and fruit flies, we have been playing spitballing procedures to accomplish imprinting engineered intention. And this is something I think that we are innately capable of, thanks to some amazing DNA design that we were given. And we're at the point now in our civilization that recognizing that number one, for our zero point devices, consciousness is the highest form of technology in the universe. And some folks like Elena Danaan have described it in those words. And we instinctively are approaching this. So work like Bill Tiller, he used 4 quote unquote well-centered individuals to create an intention field, which was then imprinted into RLC circuits, tank circuits, right? And Dan being an electrical engineer, resistance, inductance, capacitance circuits. And then when they turned those circuits on and included them in the whole process of doing the testing with temperature variation in water and pH variation, fruit fly gestations, actually had an incredible correlation when the circuits were on and the intention was imprinted into those circuits, which allowed them to create some kind of a miniature Akashic field or some such thing in and around the lab. But it was also entangled. He was able to show that these effects can be reproduced at a distance.
Yes.
And so
Yes. But no, I think that's
Albert
wonderful.
Einstein, God doesn't play dice with the universe. Well, apparently he does.
Well, no, well, I don't think it's about dice here. I think it's about physics. I knew Bill
Yeah.
Tiller quite well. Of course, I was quite young at the time, but I did know him well. And he was a wonderful guy. We got along great at many of the psychotronics events, et cetera, in Boston. And anyway, in his book, Conscious Acts of Creation, he measures about 11 different ways that focused attention causes electric fields to compress. But at no point does Bill Tiller or anyone else that we know of even have a hypothesis about how focused attention causes charge to become centripetal, even though it's
Yes.
very, very measurable. And that's where we are completely different. Now, it was PlanckPHIRE.com, PlanckPHIRE, PlanckPHIRE.com, but now it's FractalGUT.com, the top unified field physics golden theory of everything, golden toe on the planet. It was rated by Grok 4 with my partner there, Mark Rohrbaugh. So, we finished the whole thing showing golden ratio was the design of hydrogen because that's how you make gravity, and gravity was emergent because of golden ratio, implosive charge collapse, the cause of gravity, consciousness, all negentropy, and all action at a distance in the top unified field theory on the planet there. We know why it's the mechanism of action at a distance. Physics says action at a distance is from entanglement. What they don't know is the perfection of entanglement is precisely the problem golden ratio phase conjugation solves, which is perfected embedding, which is the perfected form of entanglement. And what they don't know is what they're calling the Einstein-Rosen bridge is, in fact, the wormhole through the nodes of the coherent longitudinal EMF array, which are fractal, which my other friend, Tom Bearden, proved that longitudinal EMF is the only stuff gravity waves are made of, gravitobiology. So
Yes.
back to Bill Tiller. Um, I think the physics here is quite clear. Those who are able to get centripetal are able to steer tornadoes. And what you're calling imprinting is the density that results from charge collapse implosion, quite clearly, which is quite measurable and quite tunable. So
Mhm.
when we were all done teaching Grok 4, what Grok 4 now says for sure is the top unified field on the planet, Grok 4 said to us, well, then you should measure golden ratio in brain waves. And then we said, oh, we started doing that 30 years ago and it's working great, flameinmind.com. And then Groksource looked at the data and said, oh, I guess you guys are all right everywhere. So not only do we know how focused attention creates this imprinting, but we know how to teach focused attention to do that imprinting. And of course, every ET for years has told us, when you're going faster than light, the only attention that can steer faster than light arrays is consciousness itself. But once you know what that
Exactly. Yeah.
consciousness is, the consciousness is the tornado of implosive charged plasma that results from that charge collapse. And the reason that's the mechanism of action at distance is after it collapses, precisely tuned to Planck, and we know how to tune and optimize consciousness and every 0 point energy device in existence, we can tune and optimize now that we know PlanckFire.com is how you make charge collapse. We've got 100 devices in the Patrick J. Kelly, P.J. Kelly book of a review of 100 0 point energy devices. And our team leader on that, Elizabeth Bill Donovan, knows most of those people personally. But we can tune every single one of them correctly now. For example, Sparky Sweet's vacuum triode devices, now that we know how to tune for charge collapse. For example, we can make the famous EM drive, which has microwave down a trapezoid. We can tune that
Mhm.
now that we know PlanckFire.com teaches us the frequencies of charge collapse. So not to carry on, but just to finish this thought. So the most classic 0 point energy device on the planet, the pyramid, makes 0 point power by imploding what's called, Bearden correctly called the phase conjugate pump wave, which Bearden didn't know is the Schumann harmonics. So you implode the Schumann harmonics, and when that vortex, when it's correctly tuned to Planck, which the 7.8 hertz Schumann is virtually exact, at the Planck threshold, that implodes and converts from transverse to longitudinal propagation, which is the definition of a gravity wave and the definition of all action at a distance. Then you use the lens effect of the liquid mercury to focus that coherent longitudinal into that array, which is where every single pyramid is located on that array, because that's the definition of wireless power and all action at a distance. So excuse me, I love Bill Tiller, but I think he missed a few things.
He did. And precisely why we're on this call today. So
Yeah, yeah.
I want to describe what we think we know while we're doing a group meditation. I kind of want to step through and get your input on, get some help on how best to cohere these visuals that we do within a group. The visualization is critical to get the group coherence and the resonance. Well, everybody is viewing the same kind of thing. And so the compressive implosion is, again, that was an issue that I know you had mentioned many times Einstein had struggled with. Where does the energy go? And
Exactly.
we end up with
We
this.
know where it goes. When it reaches Planck and it can propagate then longitudinally and only then there's a nest of harmonics of golden ratio times the speed of light, which makes that array superluminal, just precisely as Professor Raymond Chow famously measured 1.618 golden ratio times c, the speed of light. That's where the
Yes.
energy goes, and it then distributes into that array, which Bearden defined as what gravity waves are made of.
Right. And that distributed longitudinal array has
Yes,
nodes, which you described last time we talked, as where that orthogonality at phase conjugation nucleates.
right.
So it's very
Sure.
hard to conceive how, you get perfect orthogonality in open space, but it has to occur to create the P wave, the compressional longitudinal EMF field that
Well,
ends up.
orthogonality is a good name for it. It starts, as every physicist will tell you, you need four-wave mixing to start phase conjugation. But what the physicist doesn't know is that the next superposed orthogonal is the golden ratio in the way the tetracube precisely embeds in the dodeca, which is the only doorway to the next dimension because that's the way you superpose golden ratio around a cube. That's why it's called the next density.
Yes, and so that's precisely the visual that I like to add to these meditations that we're doing. The engine room. And you can, as you know, it's very frustrating. You see these patents for like Sal Pius's walk device and various, they all come out. And over the years have been, there's been many, many of them actually tied up in national security orders and things like that. But when you do get to peek at them, and look at the guts of the engine room, the magic sauce is never discussed. And it's extraordinarily frustrating, but we suspect that this engine room, the Planck-FIRE engine room that you're describing here, the superfluid, oscillating at terahertz, reciprocating at terahertz frequencies, and the constant helicity that's present in a superfluid, where these harmonics, these golden ratio harmonics, resonate and then create that coherence in that longitudinal array. It seems to take in and explain virtually everything. And yes, Bill Tiller didn't talk about the engine room, and he certainly didn't document what his quote unquote well-centered meditators were doing. So we are now at the point where we want to do this.
Yeah, and we should tune
I
those meditators with the brain waves, and we know how to tune that absolutely. I think
yes,
there's a classic example of where they hid the secret sauce. Let me give you the classic example. Here are the physicists. I'm not going to call them idiots. I'm going to call them physicists who run the Princeton Noosphere project, who are so proud that their random number generator was able to measure the moment 3,000 people died on 9/11. Their random number generator burped. So they say that's the noosphere. Of course, what they don't tell you is that what the actual engine room is a Josephson junction. And what the government is deathly afraid that you might learn is that Josephson junction, because of the superdielectric in its core, is a way of picking up, cohering the longitudinal array. Hello. And if you put those
yes.
things in an array, so the point is the square wave, if you nest that square wave of the superdielectric into that array, hello, you got a way of picking up, sending, receiving global wireless power, and by the way, instantaneous global communication, which is such a
Yes,
top secret that every government's willing to kill to learn that, but a 5-year-old could explain it.
or younger. Yeah. No, so the whole process, as you were saying, the Princeton experiment, we're using squids of some sort, Josephson junction, to detect this scalar burp
Yeah,
in the
scalar was a
consciousness.
bad name for longitudinal. Yes.
I agree. I've heard you say that on your podcast. It really sucks because it has a certain vector, it has a certain tensor aspect to it. It has to. Scalars don't have tensors associated with them typically. But so the JJ was sensing
Yeah.
a very big spike, very very co-located in time with the 9/11 thing, undeniable. I think it's completely
Sure.
unambiguous,
Sure.
and that is a great teaching moment. I suspect. Here's just a little anecdote, a very quick little side one. My carpenters that are here working today talk about hunting all the time and fishing. Well, I guarantee if you're sitting in a fishing boat thinking about catching that fish, there's no way in hell he's going to jump on that hook. If you just don't give a flip and you're neutral and I'm in a allowing mindset, you're going to catch a fish within 2 seconds. Same thing happens with deer hunting, etc. That consciousness, that negativity in this case, you're going to shoot the deer or the elk, pings the entire consciousness field. And that is experiential. All humans, I think, suspect this at a very base level. And the 5-year-old nuggets know it. They're born knowing it.
But I do think there's another little part of this that should be emphasized is that since we now know that the longitudinal component bounces only at what you called nucleates. I love that term. That's a good word. Nucleates at the
Yes.
nodes of that compressional array, which are obviously fractal, as in the Earth grid, DNA, Earth grid, zodiac. And so knowing where you are with respect to the nodes of the array is critical, which means basic dowsing skills, which improve dramatically when you have bliss because your DNA implodes and you can pick it up. And by the way, that's also the same reason why Agnihotra, which is done in this device here, uh, works better at sunrise and sunset because specifically That's the longitudinal array of the compression of the, as you say, the orthogonality. That's why your hair stands up. And so that ability to leverage the nodes of the longitudinal array, which is what allows you to steer, which is why every stargate ever made by the high-tech civilizations uses the natural compression sites.
And so I guess what you said was very important here. It said you need to know where you are. So I think maybe that's an item we can incorporate into our meditation and visualizations. So at these arrays, like you've said many times, it's completely distributed. Well, that is the definition of entanglement, if I'm not mistaken. Now, time and space are zero. If if we if we accept this reciprocity aspect of the universe, bouncing between the guardrails to establish some point of neutrality or resonance, then at some point, Planck time, which is, I don't know, what the hell is it, 10 to the minus 34 seconds or some damn thing. Every Planck time interval, time is zero.
Well, I think we should be, I like that language. We should be more clear. So at the compression nodes of that array, there's a potential for increasingly infinite spin density. Remember, time is only a name for the experience of relative spin rate, absolutely nothing else. And Einstein's attempt to confuse you with his bad language is not helpful. Einstein is a name
Yes.
for the experience of relative spin rate. So, for example, in the moment before death, you must see your whole life in 1 second because if you don't compress, you ain't dying well. Because enter that array is where the spin density is high, compression is required. And entanglement is a lousy term for what phase conjugation embedding perfects, which is ability to compress, embed, and train impedance match with that array. And then you begin to see through that array as a hologram. For example, very simply, as you're teaching kids to make the golden ratio in their EEG, which measurably helps them see without their eyes, they're all beginning to then see their dead grandparents, freaks their parents out, but that's an introduction to the physics, and I do mean physics of clairvoyance, which is imploding into the longitudinal array and using it as an organ of perception. Bodies become transparent, you see the nodes. So what is not happening, to say time goes to zero is a lousy expression. The correct expression would be you have the experience of potentially infinite or increasing spin density, exactly like the ice skater pulling in her hands to speed up, or the dervish who just proved in physics to his master that he has pure intention if he can spin without getting dizzy, because that is the nature of attention to hold that center, which is the definition of pure intention because that wave is shareable.
So let me parse this just a little bit. Omega is the angular momentum, that's gravity. The spin rate, helicity rate is time.
Well, no,
Um,
no, no. The spin rate is time, but gravity is the implosion of charge toward center. So gravity is a name for the acceleration of charge toward the fractal center.
exactly. And that word acceleration is important because we have been given with another ET group called the J Collective a lot of insight on that item, and they have said that acceleration is consciousness.
Well, consciousness,
That's interesting.
consciousness is a result of the charge. Well, I mean, the fundamental statement is the reason charge collapse is the cause of gravity, consciousness, life force, and all negative entropy and all action at a distance is because
Everything.
when charge collapse is fractal, tuned to Planck, planckfire.com, then you gain energy during that collapse. That is the
Yes.
cause of gravity. That is the reason seeds germinate. And that is the reason consciousness exists, because consciousness is a liquid crystal vortex in the holographic synaptic array of the brain. And if it ain't imploding, it ain't got any power. And you can measure how conscious you are by how electrically centripetal your mind is. And Bill Tiller did that many times.
Yes. So let's start with I want you to critique this meditation that we're doing in the various pieces that we're including with it. Now we do use the crystals to help us amplify and project, and that is an interesting topic unto
We
itself.
just got
But
amazing feedback, firecrystal.com. Dramatic increase in lucid dream triggering, and we know why.
yes, so let's just walk through this and jump in. I will, excuse me. This is This is a guided meditation, and I walk people through it. We've been doing it for a year and a half with a couple groups now, and attempting, we're just spitballing, literally, and expecting a little help from the guides. And we have got actually a considerable amount of help. And they get excited when we give this nonsense a try. So one of the first principles that we were told early on, and this comes from some exceptional beings. I'll just leave that as is, that are very good working with crystals. And her crystal has to be 50 million years old, blah, blah, blah. And she's very proud of it. Well, I'm very proud of this one too. There's only two other crystals in the entire planet at her frequency. That's not my assessment. That's their assessment. So there may be some folks on the call that aren't necessarily comfortable with ET intervention for contactees and starseeds and things like it's second nature. I discussed that last time. So yeah, Roswell did happen. We're on second or third base in a hurry. So we start off with an understanding that it requires a progressive step-by-step guidance. And that step-by-step guidance creates a coherence in three-dimensional time. 3D time, I want to talk with you about it at some other point in the future. It's a complex topic. But when you create a coherence in three-dimensional time, that coherence manifests reality in space, where time and consciousness are at the base of the pyramid, so to speak. Space is insubordinate to time and consciousness and is actually emergent from that. So a lot of that has to do with the discussion with this J collective we've had, take it or leave it, whatever, but they're just getting us to think. And we got to hit the potholes, use our own free will, blah, 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 to work out the details.
Well,
And so,
not to interrupt, but I just think there's some real clarity could be had there using the example of Thoth instructing the Templars in the physics of the repair of the fabric of time. And all the Palladians are saying, our time is wrong. What they mean by that, remember, time is only a name for relative spin rate, nothing else. But if
yes,
our spin rates are in phase with the classic phase conjugate pump wave, the Schumann cascade, then those spin rates collapse together and they make a centripetal force, which is inherently negentropic, as in we emerge from fractionation in time. So what you're saying is that you inhabit the array by getting centripetal, and you get centripetal if your spin rates are fractal phase conjugate implosive Planck fire. So that's what makes you centripetal
precisely.
enough to inhabit the space, which because you become the steer of that tornado when you get centripetal, which you only do, like every pyramid was designed to do, to make gravity by imploding that phase conjugate pump wave, the Schumann. So it's a very
So
specific way in which mind inhabits safe space. But I didn't mean to interrupt.
very good.
Yeah,
That's extremely helpful because what I just summed up in coherence in time, you just broke out into all a dozen different pieces. So that's the engine room, and I'll just use that as a metaphor for this massive phase conjugated implosive compression through
mhm,
Planck, resonating with, thank God for golden ratio harmonics and the Schumann resonance and the planet and everything else. All
exactly.
that is taken into play. So when we start the meditations, we recognize that it it's a little heavy-handed. Most people like to meditate, go sit on top of a mountain in a lotus position with their sun in their face and barefoot and all that kind of stuff. We are not doing that. We are being very proactive. We are the other half of the allowing. So there's another group I participate in where allowing is very important. It is not proactive. In other words, we allow the ascended masters, the angelics, to come and assist us. All right, so maybe that's right brain. For us, when we're working with these devices, we're attempting to recreate what Bill Tiller did, what Stanley Myers talked about. It is very proactive. We will take an engineered intention and attempt to imprint it. That's the bottom line. And so all the little pieces in between that you're alluding to, very, very articulately, are part and parcel to what I think Tiller described as well-centered meditators. He didn't
Well
say anything
imploded.
else.
Well imploded.
They all imploded,
Yeah,
basically, and they got it to work, not necessarily knowing how it works. And
right.
if you ever dealt with these remote viewers and whatnot, God, they never seem to know how the hell they do what they do. They can't clearly explain it many times. And so the physics, exactly what you're describing, is what we want to incorporate.
Yes.
It's now time for us to recognize that we accept this physics. We need to spitball it as working hypotheses, etc., and play with them. And when we experiment with these thoughts and these visuals and these processes, we get a lot of high force slaps on the back. And then we get more information and downloads and various other things. But it's free will of the universe, right? We have to try it. They
Yes.
can't tell us everything.
Well, this is
And so,
This is wonderful work. A couple just quick thoughts here that there's a whole bunch of hygiene suggestions to make this work better,
yeah,
obviously, like make a magnetic map of your house and find where the magnetic lines cross and get all of the poisonous Wi-Fi and Bluetooth electrosmog, turn off the main circuit breaker if you can, and surround
right.
yourself with a high dielectric, which means natural biologic material, because none of these things work in bad dielectrics, which means if you're in a steel and aluminum box, forget it. And so there's a
Yeah,
whole bunch of very specific physics hygiene that allows you to steer the tornado. And, all of those things like live food and sacred dance and all the things that enable you to have bliss all fit that picture of the prerequisites for. And then
yes,
last little thought here is I think it's wonderful that you're working on imprinting circuits. Very real, very powerful, very positive, and we could teach that physics. But even at a higher level, our group believes, luciddreamteam.com, for example, that one of the primary problems this planet has is huge astral parasites. Actually, it's the Mitra, it's the Aten, it's the largest plasma parasite in the galaxy.
yeah.
And that's what
Giant jackasses. Yeah,
it's a black spider. It's behind all Western religions because Aten from Moses Akhenaten was actually a black parasite. It's the black cube of the Muslims and the Jews. I mean, these religions are a conveyor belt into a mouth of a hungry parasite until we get groups just like yours who have enough collective coherence to be an immune system to kick these big interstellar parasites out of here.
right. And we raise our frequency just enough to get out of their, out of their, out of their influence aura, whatever it is that they imprint in locally and at a cosmic level. It's so frustrating. But I don't want to get pissed off. My guides get mad at me for losing my coherence because I'm out in my sun deck bitching at the dupe satellites and everything else. What new fires are you going to start now? And so they want me to just be calm, be gracious. Humility and grace are important. So I'm learning that. So let me walk you through some of the additional things relative to DNA. So we do focus on the DNA, and you have a wonderful description of the virtual aspects of DNA, 12-stranded and 5 in, 7 out. And we've studied that uh,
That's at
from Dave
Golden
Ross.
Mean for those goldenmean.info/DNA manifesto, the best DNA animations on the planet. And that is the recursive implosive 5 and 7 braiding, which is the physics of bliss. Sorry, go ahead. Yes, yes.
And I need to bone up on that. I've just seen that various parts will do that. But let me walk through you some of the some of the key visuals that we're using, and please critique them and we'll take them to heart, obviously. So once we start with the crystals and we gather a little frill, they help us get centered, blah blah blah. We believe, just like Marcel Vogel said himself, we believe that sincerity is critically important. Believe it and receive it. We've heard all that woo-woo stuff, and that's all incorporated. It's all second nature. So we start into a progressive guidance where the step-by-step approach we are told is very important to cohere the group. But in terms of physics, that engine room is beginning to run in the background. So I go ahead and I imprint the crystal with an intention. You can do the Dan Willis approach, blow it through your nose, looking at it directly with your eyes, right at the vortex. Through your eyes, you're projecting that electromagnetic intention, which is a tiny, tiny little voltage, but still works, into the crystal. And then the next big step that I think is so important
Well,
in
not to,
activating.
but just I think that one of the most important things to say would be that A phase conjugate breath activity, for example, the Mayer wave 10-second, 5-second, and 5-second, zero point 0.1 hertz breath is a perfect phase conjugate pump wave. And that is how I was there. Marcel Vogel charged his crystal as well. And by the way, the straight-sided crystals I'm using are more powerful than those tilt-sided Marcel ones because once you tune them correctly, they're more stable in phase conjugation.
Very good. Very good. So the frill exists in the breath.
The vril
If
is a
we blow
name.
it in,
The vril was a name for the longitudinal emanation.
yes, life force energy is its, generic metaphor. So we intend to lock that into the silicon dioxide matrix. What Marcel stressed that we use, and I want your critique on this, obviously, is that the hexagonal matrix associated with silicon dioxide in a macro sense resonates with dihydrogen oxide in its macro sense. So, in other words, the intention that it is sitting in the crystal can be transferred to the water in our bodies.
That,
And that activates the DNA radio. It also creates a little rigidity by creating structured water in our bodies. And so I extrapolated that to the point where if we visualize a liquid crystal forming like the dial on a watch or something, we have structured water forming in our bodies. Why couldn't we leverage that? It's it's now somewhat rigid. Why couldn't we create a phase conjugate motor visual in our bodies now that the water is slightly rigid? It will support shear property.
well,
Why can't we create frill in our bodies from that water that's now become slightly rigid and structured,
well,
and 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 use that to fire the whole damn DNA radio up?
no, that's a very good metaphor. The point is, and again, I think the fire crystal with the straight sides is more powerful, but I suggest you test it.
Okay.
But in any case, when you focus these crystals at water, the effect is so dramatic in the taste and the growth force of the water. If you did it in wine, it's amazing, and on DNA.
Yes.
The reason it's so effective is because water is the ideal antenna for the longitudinal component. Because I was the first one to prove that hydrogen is a phase conjugator. That's the reason it exists. So the centerpiece of the water bond and the DNA bond, both that hydrogen bond, is profoundly phase conjugate to Planck. That's why water is a beautiful antenna for the longitudinal, and water is a great media for absolutely. I would just have one more little gentle thought here. I think your thinking is very beautiful, and people could then visualize how that implosion is reaching the hydrogen atom, which is the center of every DNA codon zipper bond. Um, that there's the use of quartz in the Atlantean civilization, how it originally got the name fire crystal. Uh, Casey called it toy stone. Um, they also unfortunately used that for enslavement. Now, that's not just metaphor here. The tetracube symmetry, which you correctly note to SiO2 quartz, it's a hex, it's a cube rotating helically up a slinky. That's what quartz is. And that's why it's piezoelectric, and that's why it can connect the shortwave to the long wave. But there's a bit of an issue here, which is the SiO2 tetraquartz helix is implosive in the same way uh, the carbon nanocube, black cube, Aten, black goo. The reason the
Oh,
rabbi
shit.
is wearing a black cube and the Muslims rotate around the black cube is to infect themselves with that carbon nano, which is designed to remove everything green from every planet. It's the largest plasma parasite. And if you ask the rabbi why he's wearing a black cube from his hat, he said, so I'm totally logical and I don't listen to any emotion. In other words, emotion is the one thing the parasite can't control. Hello. But the deeper side of that is when Moses Akhenaten started every Western religion around the largest plasma parasite in the galaxy, the bribe he was told is, we will make you immortal. So he ate the red pill instead of the blue pill. And that's why
Yeah.
every religion is a conveyor belt into the mouth of a hungry parasite, all Western religions. Because Moses Aten, the wrong guy in the Anak family, took the bribe. And that bribe had to do with that black cube, black goo, Aten, the black cube, the Muslims and the Jews are worshiping indirectly the Catholic Church, so it's the same story.
Yeah.
On. The physics is that when you enter the phase conjugate array through a tetracube, the reason that Atun, black sun parasite, could promise Moses Akhenaten and every soulless being who took the bribe since then, which is the majority of humanity right now, the soulless ones,
95%. Yeah.
yeah, the soulless ones, was because, yes, they did get immortality. It is a privilege to be assimilated. I am seven of nine. I shall never feel alone. Well, guess what? When you enter the implosive phase conjugation through a tetracube symmetry, including quartz, including the black goo, the physics of the reason you can take all your memory with you there, but no soul, no individuation. The reason there will be no soul and no individuation when you enter the hive mind is because you went through a tetracube. That's the reason. Versus
Yes.
if you enter the plasma field of the collective conscious through a pent implosive plasma, which is literally only living DNA, the only real physics of bliss, that is the opposite kind of phase conjugation, which is which enables individuation to exist in that array, which is why ancestor memory can contain individual memory and that your soul is not lost. So,
So it's almost negentropic in general in that it is gaining energy. It is not bleeding it off.
well, in both
And
cases, you gain energy during charge collapse. But if you enter the array through a cube, which is the hive mind, the galaxy's biggest parasite, which,
yes.
by the way, is what's controlling the Galactic Federation right now, in spite of Elena Denon, uh,
Yeah.
it's be-
Yeah.
it's
No.
it's because the hive mind makes money not just from that human trafficking, but eating souls precisely
Yes.
because of that physics. So what I'm
It,
saying to you is the quartz is a powerful tool, but ultimately, if you do not have access to your own bliss through living plasma. Now, you could use that to trigger water. It's a nice tool. It's wonderful. But ultimately, the mechanism of the sustainable ensouling human bliss is not tetracube hex.
very interesting. Okay. So let me step back for just a minute. You mentioned breath. I
Yeah.
use a 15-second cycle, 5 seconds in, trying to cohere, resonate with the Schumann base.
Well,
5 seconds hold
actually,
with it, which
but the Mayer wave is zero point 0.1 hertz. That is a 10-second. That is the most
yes.
powerful, and that is the component of the LF component of the HRV, zero point 0.1 hertz. It's the most powerful frequency in the blood, and the breath should be tuned to zero point 0.1 hertz, actually.
Okay, so I mean it was a 15-second cycle, five in, five holding,
You've got a
five out.
subcomponent of the harmonic there, but actually, I would reach
Yeah,
to zero point 0.1
yeah.
hertz, really.
Okay, very good. I can leave out the hold part, and it's just
Yeah.
five in and five out.
Yes.
And you visualize the resonance with the planet. And I know this is extraordinarily critical for even children being born on ET starships right now. They need, even though they're higher dimensional, they need to come down to the planet and to be able to run barefoot and all that, just like human children do, to gather that breadth of consciousness that they need to build themselves up. So that's a sidetrack. So we sit with the crystal, we blow an intention in, we visualize water being acceptant, uh, gathering in the intention into our bodies. We next visualize Stuart Hameroff's M tubes, microtubules resonating, which seems to be a key component. And please critique that he and Roger Penrose, as you know, been yakking about this for, I don't know, 10 years now. But we visualize the sound of the Notre Dame Cathedral organ, literally creating the resonance in this Markov chain design of M tubes that exists in our entire body. So I want to bring the acoustic part in.
Well,
That's the idea.
that's beautiful,
And
and the infrasound of the Schumann is a perfect part of this cascade. It is infrared, and Hameroff
yeah,
doesn't have a clue, but there's actually 8 different harmonics in the microtubule, which are exactly golden ratio to Planck. And the only place to learn that is
imagine that. Yeah,
PlanckFire.com. Hameroff is clueless on that. He doesn't know why it's conscious. It's because it's phase conjugate to Planck, but he's right, actually.
yeah, yeah. And there's Federico Fagin would discount Stuart Hameroff's localized approach and say panpsychism, everything's conscious. That's a bit of a cop out, but
Well,
that's the side of the fence I stand on.
everything that's embedded in the longitudinal a node can participate in that self-organizing field. And the more compression at each node, which is the more harmonic inclusive, that's literally how you measure who's going to live forever. It's how you measure your immune health, for
Right.
example. And the harmonic inclusiveness perfected is the problem golden ratio solves.
So extrapolate on that with a working hypothesis. I would have the group visualize a cymatics type of approach,
Mhm.
a shaken sandboard, where we are attempting to create these nucleating nodes in the
Yes,
longitudinal field that we can embed ourselves in with a
yes.
whole lot of laughter going on in our heads and bliss, etc. So that's wonderful. I can add that to it because you've emphasized it so many times, hit so many people over the head with it. It's time it sunk in. And so this longitudinal array with the phase conjugate compression is the engine room. I definitely want to add that to the visual. And I think I can walk my way through that. So we add the acoustic aspect to it. I think as physicists, we've been extraordinarily negligent in ignoring the acoustic aspect in an
And you know,
electromagnetic field.
the software is done for that. At flameinmind.com, the Flame in Sound Bliss for like $20, the most powerful Bliss binaural audio. 20 harmonics, golden ratio is Planck, 180 degrees out of phase, perfect for the brainwave phase conjugate heterodyne, which massages the
Yes,
liquid. The perfect phase conjugate sound is done at Flame and Sound, the app at flameinmind.com. And that's exactly the only thing that drives all five of our global technologies now built on that piezofire.com, plasmafire.com, PHIRE.com,
yes.
originally Therify.com. They're all built only on that principle.
It's unique. Years ago, I had a conversation with the guys at Los Alamos in the research lab. I was working for an oil company at the time, and I needed some technology to to beat the hell out of the rocks with carefully. And so we got in discussing solitons, and it was a fascinating discussion. And to the point that I was describing watching a body wave transverse the South China Sea from a ship one time, way in my past. And I was out in the South China Sea shooting seismic data for a company I was working for at the time, Amoco Production. And the Chinese were involved, CNOOC, China National Offshore Oil Company. We're out there shooting seismic. Here comes this gigantic body wave across from the Philippines towards the mainland in the South China Sea. And I'm going, what in the living hell is that? Because it really messed up my geophones, my hydrophone. It's a soliton. My God, it's a soliton. And what the Los Alamos guys pointed out is they see it as an event horizon, the surface of a soliton, like the surface of a black hole, an event horizon that has numerical aspects to it. It is computative and can partially explain its seemingly ghost capability to literally walk through any material or
Mhm.
field
Well, that's
without changing itself.
a,
And I'm going,
a
that
soliton.
is a quantum phenomena.
A
How in the living
soliton
hell
is
does it?
it's basically
Because
a name for
it's skipping through your array
yes.
without messing up the nodes.
It's a nest of imploding donuts. That's what a soliton is. And
Yes,
there's more to that. I think the classic Gurdjieff movie Meetings with Remarkable Men, where the saint is defined as the one who knows how to make the perfect echo. So first of all, very few people realize that the perfect echo is the perfect description of the physics of taking memory through death. So the ability to create an echo in the array, it become a standing wave in the array and literally inhabit the array, which has become centripetal in the array, is obviously the only way you're going to take memory through death, which is called physicsofsoul.com, by the way. and, uh,
yes,
and so what you're calling soliton there is the fact that just like when ball lightning, which is an imploding torus, responds so
right.
well to telepathy, as everyone knows, the reason is because at the implosion point of the ball lightning, it is connected with the longitudinal array. And so the relationship to the array is what you're calling the ghosting. If the ghosting is because the action at a distance is enabled because every high compression longitudinal array node is interconnected by an infinite series of golden ratio multiples times the speed of light, the only physics of all action at distance, and everything superluminal, and all stargates and portals.
Yeah, ER equals EPR. I know everybody's trying to connect quantum telepathic entanglement with wormholes.
Well,
Uh, uh, I
Karatkov
can,
they did the work. They showed at the dodecaecosa nodes of the Earth grid, Kozyrev mirrors, only there could you produce military quality telepathy. What they meant was when you hooked up to the node of that array, and they would measure the nanoteslas of the Earth grid's magnetic cross lines before they'd install the Kozyrev mirror, which is, by the way, just a microwave tuning to the physics of
yes,
telepathy, which is, by the way,
yeah,
ATP, ADP, et cetera. It's DNA radio physics in the microwave, which is a phase conjugator, by the way. So anyway, the point is that the nodes of that array communicate if you understand this fractality implosion collapse bit.
very good. So let me extend the visual description again, get some more input. All right, we walk through with the effort to imprint the water in our bodies with that intention. It's sitting there, it's gestating for a period of time. We attempt to resonate the M tubes to like a disco ball. We're going to splatter this resonance all over our body. The light, photonic light, including acoustic resonance as well with the M tubes. Now we get to the point, and you had a fascinating discussion a couple of years back on junk DNA having a Boolean logic capability to them. So before we do a quantum jump in consciousness, where we become etheric, we come out of our bodies, and say we want to go visit the nine or some such thing like that, we have to do that quantum jump. And I believe, and I have people visualize this, that we just see the interlock of the junk DNA occur. And the Boolean logic, it's embedded firmware, if you will, takes off. And that might be, again, a unique design character aspect of our DNA. I'm not so sure everybody can do that. But once that happens, three, two, one, we're gone. We make that jump. When the junk DNA interlocks, so we're actually bringing into this visualization process, activating, proactively using the quote unquote junk DNA, which everybody knows is certainly not junk.
Well,
So can you tune that up a little?
Well, yes, if you start with that famous book, Grammatical Man, Information, Entropy, Language, and Life by Jeremy Campbell on the language nature of DNAs, the point is that what's called junk DNA, which is a stupid, horrible name, is a name for the fact that the spacing between the active nodes determines whether or not it can braid implode. So it's all about active spacing so that you can braid the thread into the string, into the rope, into the fat rope, into the fatter rope 7 times until it becomes toroidal DNA and implosive. So that process of that braiding is controlled by the spacing, which is controlled by what they call junk DNA, which they call non-coding. Well, the non-coding DNA is controlling the spacing, which is controlling everything. So what
Yes.
you're saying is that actually, when the DNA can recursively braid, remember we've measured this many times thanks to Glenn Ryan's help after I predicted it, that the
Yes.
coherent phonons of the EKG at the moment of bliss, all the graphics is at goldenmean.info/DNA manifesto. Again, the coherent
Yeah.
phonons of the EKG experiencing love and bliss measurably cause the DNA to braid implode. And when that DNA braid implodes, it emits from the successful compression from the transverse into the longitudinal, which is the proven physics, and I do mean physics, of the beginning of lucid dreaming, having a soul, and taking memory through death. So that university studies showed what frequencies triggered lucid dreaming, just like our PHIRE crystal does very well. So what that means is enabled compression to implode the transverse to emit into the coherent longitudinal. Egyptians call it Ba from the Ka, Gurdjieffs call it Keshan body, Tibetans call it rainbow light body. We call it coherent longitudinal embedding in the array. And that's when
Yes.
you say you could go out of your body and do that visiting, etc. So you inhabited the synapses in your holographic brain inside your head, and then you inhabit a larger array when you get centripetal among a longer wave nest. And that's what enables you to take memory through death and take your perceptions outside your body, which is critical to becoming coherent in the astral, which is where all the real fun stuff is happening. which is where Jake, our astral Irma, astral shaman, that's where they start teaching people how Earth could even have an immune system from these parasites if we got coherent in the astral.
So to embed in a long wave
Yeah.
sense this array, you're
Yes.
saying that the spacing, the actual geometric spacing
Yes.
allowed in the DNA
Yes.
is the framework, almost like a sacred geometry,
It's
or
literally
is
that's why you need to see that, you take a cube, tilt 32 degrees, blink 5 times, you get a dodeca, you ratchet that dodeca down a helix, golden ratio spacing vertically, horizontally, etc., three ways. Then that's one thread of DNA is the ratcheted dodeca down that helix. Now, if you've got to braid that braid recursively, you got 5 spins inside, you braid that braid recursively 7 times outside till it gets thick enough, the plot thickens, becomes toroidal. So you got to have very accurate spacing of the braiding nodes if you want to get that thing deployed accurately.
oh
And
yes,
that's what
for the
was called
resonance.
junction.
Yeah.
It's because geneticists don't even realize that DNA braiding is the physics of soul. So how can genetic engineers do anything to keep the soul when they don't know what soul is?
So one of my suggestions for our future testing world, a document I'm actually working on, is that everybody in the life science and medical professions are required to take at least 2 semesters of quantum physics, hyperdimensional physics, whatever our new physics is we
And to
want to
learn
call
what
this.
soul is. Soul is
Yes.
the implosion of that plasma in your aura, starting with your DNA, which allows you to embed in that big array. In other words, if your aura ain't big and imploding, you're soulless. And that's the definition of body polis, which is the definition of politics. Hello.
I'm going to quote you on that one.
In other words,
Okay, so
so the function of politics is enable body polis, which is to have bliss. And if you ain't got bliss, you ain't a cocoon that can leverage the array.
yes,
Every
you know,
every
and I,
every beehive knew that. They wouldn't attempt to navigate the array. We call it lucid dreaming. They call it a swarm. They would not do it without royal blood because there needed to be a navigator.
yes, and so I love the cross correlation to everything in biology from physics, and that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to take myself. I never studied any life science; it was all physics and engineering. So I'm trying to get along with the guys that are life science guys, and we are blending the two. If the guys studying biochemistry and biophysics don't understand that this hyperdimensional physics that we're talking about controls literally everything, then we have no hope. And
Yeah.
so that's a little bit of a different side topic. Maybe we'll talk about it more.
But
But
we should be very specific. The only thing meant by hyperdimensional is the ability to superpose axes of spin symmetry, which past three axes of spin only golden ratio allows, the way dodeca, the cube fits in dodeca. So actually, the only possible access to anything hyperdimensional requires golden ratio charge collapse. So and
sure.
DNA is the primary example of the maximum number of superposed spin in any biologic structure, 5 spins inside, 7 spins outside, the Anu. That is hyperdimensional. And when we learn
Yes.
how that is the physics of soul, then our genetic engineers will no longer be soulless.
So what you're saying is we are designed, baked into the design of our genome, the ability to do hyperdimensional jumps
To
and to,
manipulate the
yes,
array, which enables us to inhabit the larger array, which is the only way out of here.
yes. And so I've had arguments with folks that clearly we understand the cosmic universality of the one mind. Erwin Schrödinger, blah, blah, blah. There's one mind. We're always connected to that. And that's kind of a cop out. We'll just say there's a trillion souls that live there in a small
Well,
area of space.
what Schrodinger needs to learn, if I may make, I keep interrupting you, I'm sorry, but
Please, that's my,
Schrodinger is an idiot in one sense. If he's living in an aluminum steel building full of electrosmog, well, I got news for him. What he's calling God ain't there. No, we know
can't
the
be.
physics.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
know the physics because the array cannot superpose rotation. In other words, if the Schumann resonance ain't making it into your house, you're in trouble.
Well, as a matter of fact, I've had a spirit guide tell me my house has a steel roof on it, right, to shed snow. I'm in
Not
northwest
so good.
Montana. It's kind of, he says, get the hell out of the house. Go down on the lake,
He's right.
barefoot in the lake
He's
in the
right.
mud, blah, blah. And then we'll talk.
It affects the
So,
dreamings. That's called physics.
yes. So let me backstep just a little bit, get back into this whole progression of thought and these set of visuals that we're trying to trying to execute in an effort to imprint, that's our end game here, just to stay focused, to imprint these intentions. So we attempt to fractalize at a local level, jazz up our engine room in our DNA. We attempt to activate, and Dave Rossi's talked about a third strand of DNA. He's getting whispers about it. I think it's copper, gold, and tungsten or some damn thing. And then we superimpose those. You get a superposition, excuse me, of the virtual aspects of the DNA, and the whole damn thing becomes hyperdimensional, on demand, plug and play. We can do this. I'm not so sure that there are other species in this galaxy that can. This may be the secret why King Anu himself, that
Well,
jackass, sent
well,
Enlil down here to tear up our hydrogen ladders and all that story. And and and
well,
so going forward, we want to be able to make that jump and then lock into it. Okay, I want to talk to Three Eye Atlas. Let's do that, which we did the other day. It was kind of interesting through a hyperdimensional jump in consciousness, where we can actually do several things. We can ask the nine in the void to help me open the vortex in Ariane, which can be a little dangerous. All right. And I've had my guides tell me back off a little bit. Maybe you're not quite ready for this. I don't care. We're out of time. The civilization is out of time. We got to run fast and break things. And so I did with that one time. I asked for help from the nine to open the vortex in my crystal. And that's the real secret of those things. That's a secret that was hidden for billions of years. And so once you do that, you're transspatial and transtemporal. You can literally go anywhere you want without a spaceship, any when you want, blah, blah, blah. And I actually used it in conjunction with an LED med bed, which is not negentropic and all that stuff, and had some amazing results with a patient who has a pancreas problem. And the nine stopped by to help. We had 2 or 3 crystals in the mix. We're meditating, but the point was we did it. My God, we did it. We got outside of ourselves, activated everything locally at the same time, fractalized connection to the cosmic one mind, asking them for help also. The nine came down, activated that med bed in a proper way, and his medical results now are absolutely extraordinary. Doctors don't know what the hell how to explain it. And it wasn't necessarily the med bed, it was our consciousness in an effort to see his pancreas turning pink again. That was the visual that we did. And so we got big kudos for it, and we're continuing to work on it. So if we backstep just a little bit, we now come to the point where the rubber hits the road in the imprinting process. And Bill Tiller alluded to it. I've heard many, and we have downloads ourselves and advice from the advisory board. It said you have to allow the universe to finish it. You can visualize in a remote view sense a future result that you intend to happen or intend to occur, to manifest, to create reality. But you can't cross that line. And for us, that is a big mystery. I've been admonished many times for going too far in an anthropomorphic sense. If I can think my way through this, I should be able to do it, right? No, apparently not. The magic sauce is reserved for source and the universe.
well,
At some point, you just got to let it happen. That
well,
drives me freaking nuts. But
actually,
okay, source, thank you.
I think that's good physics. That actually, I mean, everyone who's good at prayer knows you, first of all, you have to already believe that it's already done. And in that process, you
Yes.
visualize with crystal clarity how beautiful looks when it is already done. As you said, you visualize it pink. Good work. But
Yeah.
you must never try to say how it is going to get done. No, 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 no.
Very good.
Oh,
Thank you.
so
That,
obviously you're going to weaken the focus of the implosion at the climax point. If you weaken that and say how to do it, no, no, no. You simply visualize with love and with accuracy the climax point with great clarity. And
yes.
that in itself is the test because supposing you're trying to heal somebody who's gland is all messed up because they got really bad karma and you didn't deal with that karma. Well, hello. Your
Yeah.
visualization is going to have some obstructions. So your test for pure intention is when you find the person that's ready to be healed, that's dealt with the karma, that dealt with all the bad decisions that were made. There has to at
Yes.
some point be recognition about a little bit of self-forgiveness about all the bad decisions. Then crystal clear visualization of the climax point, and then absolutely believe that it's already done, and then absolutely relax, which is totally conductive. That's the procedure.
And then go along with it. Just let it ride. That is wonderful. Thank you so much. It makes sense because when we try to visualize the how aspect,
You can't, no,
we
never.
just injected a whole bunch of goddamn dissonance in the
Yeah,
whole
that's right.
process.
Don't try to figure out how it's going to. No, no, no. After you're totally clear that your intention is pure, and remember, your pure intention means that the best and highest service to all beings involved has also been served. That means if there's some horrible, nasty, messy karma in there and bad decisions that were made to get to that disease, they got to be dealt with first. Otherwise, you get sucked into the karma.
Yes. No, that's great. So there's it's preconditioning of the space kind of a thing for the
I mean,
patient in this case.
the
Yeah.
definition of pure intention is the perfectly shareable wave, which is the definition of the only way in and out of the array. That's why perfect compression is the only way to die or have bliss well.
Okay. Very good. All right. So we'll sit there at that high-minded, out-of-body state. And if we've gone to visit the nine, the blue ones are male, the white ones are female, and they will extend an arm down there, and it's kind of a plasma form actually, but
Yes.
uh, when that happens, all you can do is cry for 2 hours because their emotions are so strong. But nonetheless, the
Nice.
final step is to lock it. And this is where we get into discussion of three-dimensional time, which I very much want to have with you and show you this God creation equation that they sent to us, which actually shows us how to do the math for tensor space and tensor time. I'll probably send it to you in a back channel through email or something at some point, but that's a separate discussion. But we use that concept of the squishiness in time you're alluding to. It already happened. The future is happening at the past and the present all at the same time. So to lock it into place as we discontinue the meditation and step back from it, we're letting source do the barbecue sauce. It is, I believe, very important to not just visualize it in space, but to visualize it in the eternity of time, to lock it into spherical time. And that's another rabbit hole, obviously. And I don't know, you can count on one hand the number of mathematicians and physicists that even accept three-dimensional time on this planet, which is a disaster. It's why so much of our conventional physics doesn't work. We'll just leave that comment and let it gestate. But so we visualize as we step back, we have not crossed that magic line. We just let the intention imprint and we visualize stability, resonance, coherence in three-dimensional time, which begets, which emerges, manifests reality in three-dimensional space.
Well,
So we're very specific about that.
but you could say that's another name for you create the perfect echo, and only if your intention was pure. So, I'm struck with the metaphor. If you're teaching a horse whisperer, you first have to keep a very relaxed, critical focus on the image you want to deliver to that horse. Horse is very telepathic. And then
Yes,
the actual skill is how to release that image and send it to the horse. If you hold on to the picture inside your head, the horse is never going to get the picture. No.
precisely.
So what you do is you take a deep breath and you go, and you stomp your foot, you get grounded, and you release it to the universe. And then, in other words, you trust the universe with that perfect echo, believing that your intention was pure. And then you relax and you literally forget that. You step away. And in that
Yes,
process of release, now the horse is going to see the picture you just sent.
that it makes a lot of sense in terms of charging the crystal in the first place. blow the intention in. So I see the reciprocal effect on the back end as well. Nobody seems to know how or why that works, but it is a very impulsive mindset that coheres some kind of an electromagnetic
Well,
wave,
it's what
gets
it
your
is.
whole engine room running, centripetal,
In other
force,
words, you
compression, everything.
you planned, you're cracking a whip. You plan the shape of the motion which cracks the whip. If the whip has the right density down, then the whip crack will make a perfect echo. Okay, but
Yes,
that whip crack then has to be released, and it is literally, they call it popping the quiff.
yes. So it's almost a mirror reciprocity to
Well,
everything. I
and
mean,
the wave path down that whip is precisely Hermes caduceus, which is probably who you mean by the nine in a way.
it could be, yeah. They're kind of a mysterious bunch, but that's another rabbit hole. We'll set that aside
Well,
for the moment.
I did teach Elena that physics, that at Los Alamos, when they realized that nine donuts, one above the other, do self-organize, is why there are nine roofs in a pagoda and nine steps in Dante's Inferno, et cetera, et cetera. It's because that is the plasma
Yes.
physics of self-organization. And nine golden ratio tetra shadows equals three yantra for that reason also.
Okay, good. So we've basically been through the whole process. There's a couple of ancillary things we do. We know our DNA got bitched up, cut the hydrogen ladders between the nucleotides and all that kind of stuff. So we do a visual. You take a purple toroid, a high frequency toroid, and spin it down the strands of the DNA with a specific intention to see the hydrogen ladders being repaired. And so we go from green, or excuse me, from red to green. If they're frayed and broken, they're red. And then we just literally visualize the added frequency from the frill field, whatever the toroid is providing, the life force field, and repair the DNA and reestablish that resonance so that we are plug and play local level. We plug and play our DNA to do something very specific, to manifest an intention with source involved and everything else. We need to have that resonance restored. And the stories about us getting our atomic DNA back eventually, but through EA and medbeds and all that kind of stuff. But I think we have the ability to self-repair.
Nice.
I
That's
think
beautiful. And
through this visualization thing, yeah.
hydrogen ladder is a good language because the hydrogen is the center bond of every codon pent hex. It's a golden ratio rectangle at the center, which is where the hydrogen bond is. And then there's a pent and a hex in every codon rung. The animation golden mean.info said DNA manifesto. So the zipper down the center is absolutely hydrogen. And I wrote the equation to prove that's the perfect phase conjugator. So that is the lightning zipper. And it is a ladder. You're right. And the recursive braiding. So that visualization makes total sense. And also, I think what Elena and others have called Adam Kadmon, obviously Anki Aethoth Osiris, the
Yeah.
their cookbookery DNA recipe was how the gene pool could have a soul. That's Adam Kadmon means simple. DNA that can implode well enough to have a soul and become interstellar and occupy stars. Well, to grow up and do that, the DNA has to implode correctly. And that is absolutely biophysics. And your visualization sounds very useful to me. I like it.
Yes. And so at the heart of the engine room is this hydrogen resonance,
It
which
is.
you mathematically showed.
Yes.
And golden ratio is at the heart of that. And golden ratio seems to be somehow at the foundation of everything in the universe.
Yes.
Are we surprised? I'm not.
We call it
So,
fire.
yes. So, a couple of other things we attempt to visualize, and these are just ancillary things. Um, I have a belief, and I'll be perfectly transparent with the audience and yourself. Um, I do believe that we can repair, number one, we already mentioned that. But even far more importantly, we can evolve our DNA. That is just a gut feel, Dan. I don't know where it came from. Maybe thank the Alteans. They poked us somewhere in the DNA to suddenly realize that maybe that is also part of the secret of our royal DNA, that we can fix it potentially on demand. Very, very, very careful visualizations, etc. Resonance, group, group
I think that's
addition.
beautiful. Beautiful.
Yes,
I love it.
huge.
Right on.
Yes,
Yes.
and then secondly, to actually evolve it, because right now we're kind of stuck. how are we going to improve our DNA?
Yeah. Well,
Maybe,
and we know when people have intense bliss, I had 30 years of Kundalini. During that process, my dowsing skills went way up. It's because after my DNA imploded, I could feel Earth's magnetic blood, of course. So when you implode your DNA, you become embedded in that field. The psychology of that is useful. So when the Andromedans said the only pain you feel is the love you withhold, what they really meant was uh, uh, LO phi, long wave phi ratio, literally is embedding perfective. That's what a Valentine is. Well,
yes.
if you fail to embed, which is to spell live backward, Li phi, you spell live backward, you have evil, which names failure to embed, which means simply you did not embed yourself in that field and ident I phi with it. And so literally failure to embed is the wound in the DNA. So as soon as you
Ah,
realize you need to have compassion for everything alive around you and feel it as if it were yourself, then suddenly you start to implode more and more, and then you're steering bigger tornadoes. And that is DNA repair, literally. The only pain you
yeah,
feel.
no, I hadn't gone quite that far with it, but I like it very much. It fits very well. Yeah, I've quit smashing spiders and things like that. But, but,
Good work.
um,
Good work. You got to
the,
feel them all the way.
well,
And
you make a deal with them. You leave me alone, I leave you alone,
yeah,
and
that's
so blah,
right.
blah, blah.
Negotiate,
It,
negotiate.
yeah, it's service to others, as in the law of one, I think.
That's
Okay,
right.
that
That's
includes a spider, includes a
right.
rock
And
that fell
remember,
on my hand.
the ones you need to serve are the ones in whom you can feel pure intention. So you look around and you feel around you who has pure intention, and that's who you seek to serve.
And you need to practice
Yes.
that you build confidence and a consensus reality by doing this kind of stuff where there are no other experiments other than pure instinct.
Well,
That's like
that's why
that's like
anything you,
why I like so much what you talk about. A lot of it is very instinctive, you know,
yeah.
hypothetical models that are so hard to prove mathematically, so hard to prove at a quantum level, with experiments and
Now we
stuff.
have the proof. Fractal GUT is the proof for
Yes,
sure. But
yes.
what I was going to say, that's the reason why when you look around, the ones you see with the most empathy are always the ones that everyone is in love with.
Imagine that. Give and thou shalt receive kind of a. I think Moses wrote that on one of his tablets.
You only fall in love with pure intent.
Yes. Um,
And that can steer your
and
aura. So
and I
that's
do know the guides we work with are very cognizant of intent.
yeah.
So I get admonished a lot for doing things wrong. I get told a lot of good things for doing things right. And uh, that's how it should be done. I mean,
That's
if
right.
we were, you know, 10,000 years from now, we're part of the Federation, we're helping bring young species forward. I would accept most everything the Federation does, except for this aspect of dark. I don't want to go into that. We talked about it a little bit last time. It is of great interest right now, and a lot of people are telling me they they're having to back away from Elena Denon and a lot of things she's doing because she refuses to talk about some very realistic
Um,
things.
yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
the Torthans who shapeshifted into Thorhan, who were actually a servant. They're puppets controlled by the Mitra, the most dangerous AI from Andromeda, who also have been
yeah,
a problem for the Andromedans. And their money is that plasma parasitism of that giant parasite. And the essential issue is simple, actually, that they're serving a hive mind, which is the opposite of ensouling, actually. And so that, the Federation is making huge money by keeping the Earth in quarantine, a little museum, because they
yeah,
make money from the eating the souls and the human trafficking here. That's why we're still in quarantine. And
yeah.
as soon as we know that we are steering the tornado, just as you're describing perfectly, is the moment we are no longer food for that plasma parasite.
And maybe 1% of us can bring the entire planet along.
Yes,
Um,
and which is every person who has access to any form of their own internal bliss process. Suddenly, they're steering the tornado, and then the Jewish rabbi rips that black cube off of his hat.
Off his head. Well, there's a lot to digest there
Yeah.
and tweak and modify.
Yeah.
Um, the three-dimensional time aspect, I'd like to follow up with you in a month or so sometime if you got a
Well,
little time in
when,
there.
when William Bueller and the Templars, and it was Thoth teaching directly, said repair the fabric of time, he called it a Rochelle grid, and you rearrange
Yes.
the magnetic lines and the timelines to look like a Valentine. So he said the fractionation of the timelines caused by Montauk and the Greys and the Rigelians actually invited
Mhm.
parasites in. So the timelines need to implode, be more fractal, which is to say negentropic and self-organizing. Otherwise, fractionated timelines attract parasites like Greys and the Aten. So what they meant by the repair of the fabric of time is very specific. You reorient your dance, your heart, your breath, your everything you do toward phase conjugate charge collapse. The fabric of time is literally fractal when you have that phase conjugate pump wave, and the Schumann is the perfect example.
Yeah, very good. I think we're stretching obviously conventional physics and standard model of physics by trying to incorporate three-dimensional time in
But we
so
have
many
proven
things that
now,
we're trying to do. Yeah,
fractalgut.com has published equation proof that time is only a name for relative spin rate. It's obvious. Einstein thought it was a mystery. Your watch speeds up when you accelerate. It's not a mystery. No,
yeah,
some of the acceleration is translated in vorticity. So the mechanical acceleration of your watch is translated to increased spin rate in that watch called time. That's why the watch speeds up when you accelerate it. So once you understand its experiences, and you're not bending space-time, that's pure crap. No,
yeah.
you're changing the acceleration towards center. The problem is if you don't know why anything is centripetal, you will never learn why gravity or consciousness or negentropy or self-organization or life force or seeds germinate. You will never learn until you
Well,
know, learn
I know that.
centripetal forces.
Yeah, I know Einstein pushed away from the centripetal aspect of everything, this implosive engine room.
Because he
Everything.
didn't have a clue.
Why did everything have to be centrifugal? It's far more. It's far more makes
And
far
that
more
And
sense
that's why
if it's
physics got
centrifugal.
into this fatal self-destruct mode calling the universe is condemned to entropy, when the opposite is the case. We're destined for negentropy once we learn how fractality creates negentropy, which is charge collapse, fractalgut.com. Anyway, that was
So
a
yeah,
heavy one.
you throw out the second law of thermodynamics. You include three-dimensional time. You realize that Heaviside couldn't do the computations right. Lorentz
No,
is trying to justify relativity.
no,
All of our 100 and last 150 years, our base physics
it's just
is catastrophically messed up, bitched up beyond almost beyond belief. It's
what
amazing.
Heaviside did when he castrated Maxwell's equations by eliminating the fourth quaternion was eliminated the ability to represent spin. Bearden was clear on that. So, and if you
And
couldn't
you,
represent spin, of course you couldn't represent implosion. So you would never have the possibility of learning why anything is ever centripetal. And if you don't learn why everything is centripetal, you won't know consciousness or gravity, life force. You won't learn why seeds germinate. You won't learn how negentropy happens. Or you,
yes, this is
yeah,
absolutely fundamentally systemic to your
fundamental,
engine room. It
fundamental.
is absolutely at the core of everything.
So
It also happens,
it is the bumper
yeah,
sticker, get centripetal or get dead.
or get dead. It is also at the core of the discussion we had with this ET collective called the J Collective. And I had to check up on them, my guides, and I think I mentioned this a little bit in the last one. I'll be real short. He checked up on them, and yes, there is a thing called the J Collective. They're kind of scattered all over the galaxy, but they were here to help in the Atlanteans and some other things. Well, in the past 15 to 18 months, they've finally given us an equation to show us how to, with quaternions, do tensor time and tensor space consistently in 6D time space, and have been unequivocal with their comments that said you will make no progress, no further progress with physics, which we haven't in how many years, until you incorporate tensor time, until you incorporate Cartesian time. And fundamental to this whole thing is spin,
Which is to
quark
say,
spin,
it,
subatomic spin. They
it
couldn't
is
apparently give a shit about charge. And
it's
what are
it's
the guys at CERN doing? Playing
well,
with
it's
charge.
It's implosive spin. That's the issue. And charge is
Very,
just a
yeah, yeah.
name for the compressibility of the superfluid of the universe or the ether. But implosive spin, and you're right, it starts, you can't begin implosion phase conjugation without a cube four-wave mixing. But then every axis next dimension is when the cube embeds in the hypercube, which is the pentodeca and golden ratio. So golden ratio
Scales
is the
itself.
key.
Yeah.
And actually, I would like to put you in touch with Mark Rohrbaugh, fractalgut.com, to discuss the representatives of higher dimensional time, which he calls emergent gravity, by the way. So to be
So
continued.
that's the ancillary part of the comments on three-dimensional time. And I'll just be very quick because I want to spend 45 minutes or so with you and go through all the details. They gave us all the math. I want to step through the whole thing. It's giant equations as long as my arm, but it is internally consistently recursive to pick a grid reference for t of xyz. They
It is
showed us how to
recursion
do that.
perfected, actually. But go ahead.
Yeah, it just sounds like a DNA, snake wrapping back on itself. It's a
Yeah,
Caduceus thing all over again.
yeah.
And so they let us think about it for about a year. Uh, and they said, well, the grid reference, they didn't describe it completely. They let us think about it for a year. And I said, well, what the hell? Every boson in the universe has to have a grid reference to determine Cartesian time? That's not going to work. And so they came back just very recently in the past few months and said, no, there is a grid reference that can be assigned for every locality. And
Yeah.
that is given by gravity,
Well,
where
it is.
gravity is emergent from temporal anisotropy,
Well, the gravity,
lumpy,
the
lumpy time
gravity
field.
The gravity emerges if it's fractal or conjugate, which is what made it centripetal. I would add one more thought, as the Pleiadians knew that when you begin to express in base 12, and by the way, golden ratio is a rational number in base 12, and by the way,
Dodecahedron.
the 5-7 spin symmetries are dodeca and dodeca. So base 12 is the necessary math for this physics, we think, actually. But that's a
Wow.
conversation for another day.
It is. So I'm just hitting high points because it just kind of gestate a little bit when we have our next conversation. So anyway, this temporal anisotropy can be driven by temperature variation. Even at a half a Celsius degree change between here and Andromeda is one hell of a potential. And so it is lumpy. The spherical time field, 3D time field, tensor time field is lumpy and it's potentiated. What the hell? And so time and omega, helicity, angular momentum being gravity. And it is directly affects the spin at subatomic level is what they're telling
Oh
us,
yeah,
at the quark
yeah,
level. And
absolutely.
and
You know,
and so
the theosophes, they saw it. They saw the subatomic, the anu, which is a 3 anu per quark, and they saw
yeah,
the anu inside living material were happy, but the anu inside aluminum were pissed off. Those
yeah,
subatomic particles are in pain. Hello, why are the
yeah,
subatomic particles in pain inside aluminum? It's a very important question. Another day, another
yeah. And so why did Scotty make his whale tank out of transparent aluminum?
day.
Oh, that's disclosure. Remember that? Star
Yes,
Trek.
yes, but
And so anyway, I digress. But so here we are with a spin-centric concept
it
for
is.
Cartesian time, and then space being insubordinate to everything in time, time being foundational to literally everything.
Well,
And
it's
so that turns the whole goddamn physics world upside down
well,
on its
in other
head.
words,
Start over. Yeah,
fractality in spin is what establishes order in space, which is, say, fractality in time, basically. Yes, yes,
everything in space is moving for Christ's sake. The
yes,
whole superfluid is jiggling in a
that's
vortical suck going at terahertz
that's
frequencies.
right. And if you ain't centripetal, you ain't got no power.
You are not negentropic for sure. So anyway, that's a little bit of a precursor. The real interesting equation, and I had this discussion with a bunch of professors in Salt Lake City here a month ago, and they were pie-eyed. I presented my whole white paper. I showed them the three-dimensional time thing, and they were actually very receptive because it was so outrageous. How could you not at least be interested? And so the key was, and I need some help with this eventually, and maybe you could think about it a little bit to now and then. It would appear that if you grok this thing, they'll tell you there's no elemental transmutation capable other than through charge, where you add a proton to a nucleus or a neutron or an electron, and you got a new element. dog shit to gold. And so it would appear, and if you ask rock this, they say absolutely not. No way can spin heterogeneity bloom into a potpourri of elements.
Well, no, that's the physics of charge collapse is the only physics of alchemy. We have all the equations for every commercially valuable isotope transition in the atomic table. Elizabeth Bill Donovan did that years ago. We have
Based on frequency. Yeah.
well, it's based on frequency and temperature, for example, how to convert aluminum to silver, et cetera, et cetera. So
Oh, okay.
it is the charge collapse of isotope transition tuned specifically to PlanckFire.com that enables that charge collapse, the definition of alchemy, meaning alchem access to a black hole. So we know about isotope transition, the physics of alchemy. And they're right, it is about fractality in time because that is a name for charge collapse, actually. So anyway.
So maybe that's why people had trouble with Floyd Sweet's VTA. They
Well,
don't, it didn't understand, that it's subtle tuning required of the barium
actually, and
pair.
and the tuning is PlanckFire.com. And by the way, world expert on that's probably our Elizabeth Bill Donovan. We need to have a chat with him. We'll get him on with he knew for
Yes, very much so.
to be
So
continued.
anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there because my own instinct is telling me that spin heterogeneity, as opposed to just charge heterogeneity,
Well, charge.
left-handed chirality
Well, no, charge.
will create transmutation. And yes, the engine room was running in the background, but as a macro statement, I think spin can create transmutation.
Well, remember, charge is just a name for compressibility of the superfluid of the ether. That's all charge is, plus or minus
Yeah,
charge.
density. Yeah,
Compression,
energy.
rarefaction. But the spins, when the spins are fractal, self-similar, recursive phase conjugate, then you can do charge collapse, which is the definition of isotope transition,
Oh,
and
I see. All right.
that's the definition. Because basically the charge can't jump between electron shells without the non-destructive path, and that's the definition of alchemy, which is defined by PlanckFire.com, which is when we have all these equations for isotope transitions, which, by the way, 1/10 of a degree C up or down is absolutely critical. In addition to the frequency, Joe Champion got the temperature, but not the frequencies. Well, to be continued. Conversation to be continued.
Yes,
But
yes, very much so. Very excited. Well,
I think
thank you very, very much, Dan.
we made
Any
good
other
progress
closing
today.
comments?
Well, no. Well, I just want to honor the work that you're doing where you've connected the physics to the actual healing work and where you connect the breath and the healing work and you're actually making a diligent attempt to connect the physics. So I stand in service to your pure intention, sir.
I think our patient may well be a test case we can show the whole world. God bless him. He's been very sick for a long time, and he's now getting all new doctors because they refuse to believe that any of this stuff he's told them that we were doing with him. They refuse to believe in any of it.
Well, we
So
should show them some of our, PHIRE.com, Therify, PSFire, Plasmafire. Our devices do this every day, and we should work with you more. So to be continued. Thank you.
thank you very, very much. I appreciate it truly from my heart. Thank you, Chris, for setting this all up. And we're working on ways to help heal everybody.
Exactly. More fun to come. That's how we become a shareable wave. I am here because of you, and you are here because of me.
I
Thank you.
cannot do it without you. You can't do it without me. I
Exactly.
think we knew that somewhere about 100,000 years ago, and we forgot.
The Sufis knew. Thank you. Blessings. See
Thank
you
you
soon.
very much.
Bye-bye.
See you guys soon.
Thanks, Chris. Bye-bye.